We're going to be talking about alts and accounts today. I like getting the most bang for my buck when it comes to Omega and everything. So I'm going to kind of explain how I used to do account management, or how I used to handle alts, and kind of what it looks like now in terms of getting them, justifying the cost of Omega and everything like that. Now, a general rule of thumb for me, a good policy is like always have more characters than you have accounts. And I'll kind of explain this. I have a spreadsheet we're going to be using to hopefully illustrate my my thought process on this. But back when I was first started playing, I was in a mining corp. When I first started adding alts, I just made a new account, right? Because the reason is because if you make a second alt on an account, it can't be logged in with the first. So if you're looking at things through a mining perspective, you need that extra account, right? But there's things you can do to actually kind of, help your bottom line before you're even scaling, or at least if you have your mining crew now, you want to make a little bit extra with those accounts. We'll talk about all that stuff too. So let's go and grab up our spreadsheet here. Pretty simple spreadsheet, nothing too crazy here. But we're going to be using this to illustrate what I'm talking about. We have Plex costs in here. We have Omega costs, total Omega costs for all the accounts. So we're going to be simming out to like 4 accounts, 12 characters. This video is not about earning or playing to Plex your account. It's not this doesn't matter if you're swiping the card for $15 or if you're spending 500 Plex. We're talking about value, right? Absolute total value for everything that account produces, and in order to justify its existence. The reason I say that is because if I have if I bring up a second account for mining, if that second account is not generating a whole lot of ISK, I might as well spend that $15 on a Plex pack as opposed to Omega, and save myself a lot of headache and everything. So let's go look at a configuration for kind of how a mining crew could look like if you didn't have secondary or tertiary characters. So we're going to be using arbitrary numbers for this just to kind of help illustrate the point. Some of the things like product discovery and PI will be a little bit more accurate because they're a lot more easy to quantify. But like I said, mining, ratting, exploration, that's going to be entirely dependent on how much you play. So we're going to put just like, a fixed number in there to help kind of illustrate things. So let's kind of set up this 4 accounts for how my situation looked like back in the day. We're going to use a flat value for mining of 25 million per character per day. And so we're going to use this. We're going to put this on character 1, 4, 7, and 10. And then we're going to change this number down here to 4. So what this does is this is going to be, actually, this can be changed in several different ways. So this is a good representation of if you have like all mining ships out and somebody else is boosting you. But if you're boosting yourself, if you have your own porpoise or you have your own orca, the mining income for this first account is going to be 0. And then these will go up a little bit. It's not exactly double in terms of yield and value and stuff. It's a little bit less. So I think we'll probably bring this up to like 45 million. And this is going to sim the boost, right? We'll say booster right here. So you're looking at a total value per day of about 135 million, which is pretty good. That's a pretty decent mining session per day. Now that's going to put you at around 12 billion. 4 accounts is going to be about 12 billion and some change with today's Plex prices. And so as you can see just right here, just not even doing like indie jobs, not doing PI, not doing product discovery, not doing any of that stuff, we're in the hole pretty consistently, right? And so the way I approached this in the past was I just need to mine more. I just need to add more hours, and that can lead to burnout, a significant amount of burnout. But like 3 years ago, when I started really consolidating my entire kind of setup and kind of optimizing it, I started just doing other things on accounts and adding additional characters to help bring in a little bit more for each of those slots. So the first one was product discovery. I started doing product discovery probably 4 or so years ago, probably more than that, but I usually only do project discovery on my Omega accounts, and that is, if you do all the submissions, that's 20 million per day per character. So we're gonna put that in here, and we haven't added any secondary or tertiary characters to these accounts yet. But we're gonna go and say, yeah, we're mining, and we're making 135 million a day, and then we're also doing our project discovery, which equates to about 80 million a day. But that brings our total income to about 6.4 billion. So we're about halfway there. Not quite there yet. And then I started doing PI. When I first started getting into PI, the entire purpose was, one, I found the gameplay loop pretty interesting, but also it was just going to allow me to get a little bit, squeeze a little bit more ISK out of these tunes. We're going to use a flat rate of 10 million for these guys. It's a little bit extra training, but once you get that training done, like, it can add 40 million a day on the low end. That puts us about 7.6. So we're slowly getting there. We're slowly getting there. Now, obviously, like, these, we are only running like 3 alts with a boosting ship. So you can see we still need to come up quite a bit to kind of make these accounts worth it. And that's where we get into secondary and tertiary, what I like to call passive alts. There's a difference. I usually distinguish active and passive alts. Active alts would be like the alts that the mains on each account that can be in space or benefit from being in space together. That's your N+1 gameplay loops, like mining, ratting, or even just having a bunch of alts in different systems doing exploration, at the same time. There is an inherent ability to scale whatever you're doing in space by just having those guys together. That's what I would call active alts. Passive alts are ones that are not going to be out there with your other tunes. They play more of a passive role. They do indie jobs. Their value comes from research and manufacturing slots. Their value comes from project discovery and PI, and also Sinos. Sinos is like not anything you can like quantify, but it's more or less like a quality of life feature or ability you can give to your alts. But at the end of the video, I'll kind of explain, how I handle, how I did in the past handle like my Sino alts, and how I, kind of changed that to fit better in a smaller account kind of setup. It's really hard to quantify indie jobs too. You can add, like, it depends on what you're making. But, let's say, just for the sake of argument, let's say that like every character, whatever it's making, let's say you're doing like, the value is like 5 million per character per day. Just to like kind of put a number in there, because, it's not nothing. It's largely dependent on what you're actually making. You can actually do the math based on whatever you're making. You can do the math and figure out down to like the hour what each manufacturing slot is, valued at. But for the sake of this video, we're just going to put 5 million in there. So even with that, we're still looking, we still need to come up with about 3.9 billion to justify the cost. And like I said, this is not based on like us trying to plex into Omega. Like, we're still thinking about, like, we're still swiping the card, but like, instead of swiping the card on account 4, if it's not like picking up its own slack, instead of swiping that card for 4, we can spend that $15 and just buy a plex pack and not worry about all the bullshit that we have with these characters, right? That's what I mean by justification. Let's go and start filling out the secondary and tertiary characters, and you're going to see how it starts to make a lot of sense and it starts to scale. Because as we add these characters, we're not actually adding accounts, so we're not actually increasing our Omega requirement every month. So normally what I do is, at the very least, project discovery on everybody, right? So let's go ahead and add 2 more tunes in slots 2 and 3, and they're going to do project discovery. So that helps us a little bit. Another thing I'll say here too is one of the big reasons why in the past I never actually started doing secondary and tertiary characters sooner was because I was thinking to myself, well, if I make another character, I have to get an MCT for it, and I might as well just have that tune on another account, and it can be in space, if I'm gonna pay for that anyway. Until I changed the way I was thinking about these alts, until I kind of drew that line in the sand, was like, this is going to be a passive alt, this is going to be an active alt. What I normally do on the passive alts is I'll train them with an MCT until they get their PI skills till they get manufacturing and research slots, and when they have all the things they need, then I'll just turn their skills off. I don't need them to do anything crazy. So like my tunes now, they'll do like covert op, blockade runner training. They'll do their PI training, and then we'll try to get at least 10 research and manufacturing slots. I usually don't go for the 11th slot because it's just a big train. And so once they can do all those things, like they can use a blockade runner or a infrastructure, one of the new infrastructure hold ships, and they can do all the PI at max, and they have those 10 slots for research and manufacturing. I turn them off. They just don't train anymore. There's no reason for them to train anymore. So just by adding those two guys over here and doing product discovery on them every day, we're down to like 2.7 that we need to come up with. We're gonna go ahead and add a secondary and tertiary character for all 4 accounts, and we'll see how that treats us a little bit. All right, so now we're net positive for the Omega cost and all of that. Now it starts to make sense by having these accounts around. Now let's say we set up PI on all of them too, and they're all averaging about 10 million a day, which is low actually, but I think that's a good way to estimate. Now we're in profit of about 3.2 billion. And let's say we get all their research slots, filled up too, and we're just scaling our the jobs that we can do. I usually prioritize research slots first because that's, especially if you're doing like T1 hulls for manufacturing, those can take a long time in the cooker. So I get those research slots in. I'll let all of these characters. This allows me, if there's like 10 slots per character here, that's 120 things you can research all at once. And then once they get their manufacturing slots, then you can buy additional BPOs. Let's say you're making ventures, just for the sake of argument. Let's say we get 12 venture BPOs, and then every single day these guys can just run them, as we have the materials for them. Just an example, but you can see how you can start to quantify or adding this additional revenue. Like right now on account 1, if we just take these, example numbers here, you're adding quite a bit just to that whole account, and we didn't even change or even add any more Omega on top of it. But like to even simulate this a little bit more, like that's 12 characters across 4 accounts. If we would have actually just split them off onto their own accounts, like 1 character per account, then we would have increased our Omega to like 36 billion, or 15 times 12, which is insane. So that's why nowadays I make sure I have slots 2 and 3 on all these guys. A lot of my consolidation efforts actually has been taken, since I had split, I had a lot of alts on their own accounts. When I started making like the transition, I ended up just like paying the $20 to transfer like a lot of these characters into my other accounts, and just consolidating everything down, which has helped a lot too. But hopefully this concept makes a little bit more sense now. Like you should always try to fill out that second or third slot the best you can. Let's talk about Sinos now. Sinos, when you start getting into capital ships, moving them around is important. What I used to do whenever I would run my own jump freighter is, like a lot of people that were around me at the time, they would just have an individual account for every one of their Sinos. Let's say they needed to do a 9 jump route, right? 9 jumps to Jita and then 9 back. They would log in all 9 of those Sino alts, and then they would do the jumps. But what's crazy is like, when you do like 3 jumps and you like see something on, in system or something, you might have to wait. There's some downtime. You might not be able to do all 9 all at once. It just didn't make a whole lot of sense to me. And I had a lot of accounts when I was doing like, I think at the time I was doing like probably a 14 or 15 jump route. This was back when I was in drone lands, like Cobalt Edge kind of situation. So it was a lot of alts required for that. When I started consolidating everything, my strategy with Sino alts changed. So first off, your main account's not going to have, usually it has Sino alts. It can. I usually train them all Sinos anyway, because you never know which character is going to be flying the capital or the jump freighter. But here's how I now handle sign waltz. So what I'll do is this will be the number in this column will represent the jump number. So we're gonna simulate a 9 jump kind of route. So what I'll do is, and I'll log in 3 tunes at a time, and these guys, this is characters for count 2, 3, and 4. These guys would be logged in. They would do the first 3 jumps of the entire route. So we would jump from origin to the first system, second system, third system, and then we would chill. Get rid of our jump fatigue, whatever. That at that point, these 3 characters will log out, and then we will switch out to our secondary character. This secondary character will handle the 4th jump, the 5th jump, and the 6th jump. So now, same account, 3 different characters. They're already in place. Sometimes you can just put them in place. You don't have to worry about like jump cloning or anything. You log in the next 3, you do the next 3 jumps, and then when you're done, you log those guys out, and then the tertiary character on those accounts will handle 7, 8, and a jump 9. What this allows you to do is not necessarily leave. It allows you to not leave like sign waltz like in local or whatever. It's like we do 3 jumps, we log them out, and we switch them out. This is really nice because you get basically you can cover a 9 jump route with just 3 accounts, which is great. And obviously, like, if this character 4 is the one your jump raider pilot, then you would just shift these 3 Sinos over here. That's why I end up running Sino. I train everybody in Sino, really. It's kind of like, just like the Magic 14. For me personally, I have my own policy. Blockade Runner, Sino, PI, manufacturing research slots, and try to get them as far into mining as possible by using crystals. I want them to all have as much utility as possible, and this is how I handle things now, as opposed to like just running one account or one character per account. It makes a lot more sense. It allows me to actually downscale a lot. And then if you're kind of set up for this, let's just take these 2 accounts out. Let's say you're not up to like 4 accounts right now, so you're just running 2. You're still in the positives with this kind of a strategy as well. And I think it makes sense too, is like get yourself to this point before you add that other mining alt, right? When you add that other mining alt, your Omega requirement goes up, and then you're going to have to come up a little bit too. So like, obviously you get that new mining alt, it's also going to be doing all the other things we talked about, and your ISK positive, right? And then you just kind of slowly build that account out. You go, second account on that, or third character on that account. Now you're up 2.9. Now you're probably ready to add, that other mining alt, that other account, which will also be doing all this stuff. And you're back into being positive. Actually, we need to put this back up to 4. Back into being positive. And then in order to make that, what I would like to make that account complete, you have that second and third character running as well. It's just a really good way to kind of like, make sure you keep income coming in and justify those guys. Because there for a while, like when I stopped mining for a very long time, I just stopped, swiping the card on a lot of my mining alts. Because I was kind of burnt out with mining, and I just wasn't doing it. And that was the problem with those characters. They weren't doing PI, they weren't doing industry jobs, they weren't doing product discovery. So the only thing they could do was mine. And if I wasn't mining with them, there's no reason to log them in for. I was kind of spinning my wheels on that Omega time. And yeah, you can argue that like, yeah, they're still training, they're still like, getting better in terms of skills, but you also should always have something to do, or have always a way to like contribute and everything. And I think PI is a really good way to do that kind of passively, especially when you build out a new account, you get that first character on there, get PI set up, get it trained. Let that be the first thing you do, because then that character starts adding an immediate benefit there. But hopefully you guys enjoyed this video, and I just want to kind of explain a little bit, how I kind of manage my accounts and stuff now. I think it's very important. I still talk to a lot of people who are still running like single character accounts, and they're just scaling accounts as opposed to like scaling characters to help kind of supplement everything. And that was like my biggest revelation back in the day. I was like, yeah, if I can just save myself a lot of time and headache and just spend $15 on Plex as opposed to Omega, then that makes more sense in my mind. That just made it to where like every one of my accounts, I just have very strict guidelines for what I want those characters to do and all that stuff. But thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.